Welcome to the config and tech video for Dead Space 1. Get my notes open. Where we get the folder view for the install of the game on the left here and my notes on the right. In this video we'll be setting up Dead Space 1 general and advanced settings where needed. This will hopefully put the game in the best playable state it can be. Then there will be a modding video that follows this video. Any links that are covered in this video will be in the description below. I wanted to mention some adjustments to the folder side of things that I'm doing in these config and tech as well as modding videos. These files, like for instance, you're not going to have in your folder, and I'll get to that, but the first thing would be any extra files that aren't folders that don't really apply to anything I'm going to be discussing. I'm hiding those files in the folder so they're not a distraction or anything like that, because they're not going to be something that's going to be directly talked about. I'm not deleting them, I'm just hiding them in the folder so they're not seen. These are obviously going to be talked about, and then I want to keep all the folders visible. And this is just containing stuff that I want to show you as we get through this. So this just has personal video stuff in it. And then I also decided to hide my address bar for showing exact locations, kind of like this is showing my path here for my notes, which is fine because this is a working YouTube folder that I do everything out of, but I wanted to have my own discretion of whether I show certain paths in my computer when I'm doing these videos in folders, so I've opted to just hide those. I'll show them or show you paths such as this one when it's applicable, but I would prefer just for personal reasons and privacy and security and all that other stuff to not just have that visible. So yeah, that's the changes I've made on that. Everything else is the same. So the first category we're going to get to here of settings is pre-options, adjustments, and information. So saves and settings locations. This path here is going to be where your Dead Space 1 saves are going to be placed. And this path here is going to be where your settings file for the game is saved. Two different folders on your computer. The one thing you're going to have to change is you're going to have to specify your actual username. Which will be different from what mine is. That's why I wrote this in here. So just replace this with what your actual username is on your computer. This way, if you need to get to save in settings, you can. And we will need to get to the settings in this video. So go ahead and open that folder on your computer if you're watching this video. The next section here is impossible difficulty, early unlock. You unlock this difficulty mode by beating the game on hard, but you can unlock this right away just by doing a simple file edit. So go to the following folder. Your location may vary, same thing. The username is going to have to be adjusted. We're basically going to the settings location right now. So go to this location. You will see a file called settings.txt. Open this file in Notepad and change the following line. Game.played equals 0 to game.played equals 1. Save your changes and that's it. They didn't hide that very well, did they? So we'll take a quick look and I'll show you what to do. So I'm going to go in my config and tech folder here. And then I've just made a shortcut to this location so that I could open it quickly. You can see you have a controls file in here, which you can't directly edit outside of the game. At least I don't know how. When you try to open this file, open it with Notepad, you just get, you know, encoded language. So we're going to open the settings file here, get this full screen, and then you're going to want to go down to here. And by default it's going to be 0, since it's going to be like considering it's a fresh install, fresh playthrough, and you haven't beaten it on hard mode yet. So just change that to 1 and save it, and then when you start a new game you should have an option to pick impossible mode if that's the difficulty you would like to play on. So that covers that. The next thing I want to go over is called a continue game bug. The game's difficulty can change itself when multiple save files are present. It only changes itself when you save at the end of a chapter, saving in the train. To avoid this happening, always select Load Game instead of Continue Game on the main menu to avoid it changing the difficulty. I wasn't even aware of this being an issue until now. I'm not sure why they never patched this, but, you know, it's Electronic Arts, so yeah, anytime you have multiple saves, which it's always a good idea to always make new saves when you do, or you have the option in a game to do so. But anytime you come back to play the game, never ever use the continue, just use load. And then that should avoid you having your difficulty change. Next thing I want to go over is anisotropic filtering, anti-aliasing, and VSync. I recommend using your NVIDIA or AMD graphics card settings to adjust these. Anisotropic filtering, there's no setting in the game for this, so we'll have to force it into the game to get the benefit of it. Anti-aliasing, the AA in the game is not good and just blurs the overall image. I'm opting myself to use Reshade to force SMAA anti-aliasing, as well as do some minor color adjustments. VSync, I do advise using VSync, not just not the in-game version of it. The animations and the mouse movement in Dead Space are heavily tied to the FPS, the frame rate, as the game was designed for 60 frame rate. Increasing your frame rate may result in issues related to the above. So I'll show you how to do that real quick. So I made a shortcut. I guess I'll just show you how to do it. So down in my start menu here I have my NVIDIA settings, or I can right click on the desktop and open it here. Either way. For AMD I don't know what you're going to have because I always have had NVIDIA graphics cards, so I don't know anything about AMD's software. So through NVIDIA you'd want to go through Manage 3D Settings and click on Program Settings. And you most likely are not going to have it just popped up in the list, but if you don't see it on this program, then if you've recently played or started the game and you click Add, it should be at the top of the list somewhere. Mine isn't because I've already got it added. You could also click the drop down and look for it. So select your Dead Space EXE. And then for the anisotropic filtering, just go into here, and as you can see, I'm forcing it on myself. And just bump it all the way to 16x. Then you'll have that effect in the game. And then I stated for anti-aliasing I'm using Reshade so that I can use SMAA. If you're not using that or you don't want to use that, then you can force it on through your graphics card, and the way you want to do that is go to anti-aliasing mode, And you can either put this on, I think there's another option, I guess it depends on the game. Enhance the application setting is what you'd want to pick. And then for anti-aliasing setting, I would take it and put it all the way up to 8x. And you could mess around with the transparency on the anti-aliasing, but I just leave it off. I don't really rely on the graphics card for aliasing much anyway. But if I was just going to force a good old standard anti-aliasing into like an old school game, this is how I would do it. Enhance the application setting in 8x. There's another option that's something like override or something. Whatever one is on the bottom or the lowest in the list is going to be probably the best one you want to pick. And then the last thing you'd want to adjust is the vertical sync. Just go to vertical sync. And I personally don't recommend using adaptive half refresh rate or fast. Either use VSync or don't use it is what I say. And if you're going to use it, then put it on, just on. So for me, I'm using reshade, so I'm not going to have anti-aliasing on. So I'm going to put all this stuff back to default. Excuse me. So just 16x anisotropic filtering for me, and then VSync on, apply. And that's it. That's all you got to do. Okay, so that covers all that. Let me take a sip of drink here because it's going to be a mouse sensitivity, a long section. Okay. So for gamepad users, if you're going to play Dead Space 1 with a gamepad, then you should be okay. I can't confirm this though, as I've never played the PC version with a gamepad. You're more than welcome to skip this part of the video if you aren't using a mouse and a keyboard. I'll put a timestamp up on the screen right now for you that you can go to skip to the next section of this video. Okay, just a little explanation here. The mouse movement in Dead Space 1 on PC is horrid and unacceptable that it was released this way and never patched. Not surprising though, as modern day PC games are just ports of console versions. That's why modders are so important to PC gaming. They fix things developers can't or won't do. If you don't use these adjustments covered below, then I advise you to not even bother with keyboard and mouse, as you're going to have a terrible gameplay experience. So this is part one. There's two parts of this. Part one, so the first thing you want to do is download a simple single file, thanks to the modder methenhydrate for this fix. You can find this file on the PCGamewiki. And the link here will take you directly to his posting for you to download it. Note, depending on your antivirus software, when you try to extract the file, it may flag this file or try to quarantine it. Trust me when I say it is safe and a false positive. Antivirus software doesn't like .dll files in general, so it is highly likely that it will tell you it is unsafe. If it does quarantine the file, you will need to remove it from your antivirus quarantine list, then ignore that file from future scans. It's not going to help you with every DLL file that you mess with in the future, which is a good thing. It's just that particularly named file. This file being dinput8.dll. This is the only file you're going to need or have to do this first adjustment. It needs to be placed in your folder where you installed Dead Space 1 alongside the deadspace.exe. So as you can see in my folder here, here's my Dead Space executable, and then here's the file that I'm talking about. It switches the mouse movement to raw mouse input, giving you more actual control of the aiming and the looking, which is how it should have been to begin with. Mouse movement tied to the FPS or frame rate is never a good idea, as the developer can't know how consistent everyone's FPS is going to be on their PC. So when you have up and down fluctuations in your frame rate, if your computer's not, the best, then that's gonna, in turn, you're gonna experience lag or stuttering in your controls because it's not lining up with the frame rate. So note, missed it, get down to it, yes, this note. There are situations in the game where this mouse fix has issues though. Methenhydrate, if you are reading this, please consider fixing this. A general but minor issue is moving your character in the camera at the same time can result in some weirdness. It's very minor and not really an issue. The main issue occurs midway to late game. You will start to encounter these organic, squishy floors. When you walk on them, the mouse movement is extremely exaggerated. It feels like two times to 3 times accelerated, and it goes wild, and it is hard to control. In gameplay terms, you never have to fight anything when walking on these floors, in general, from what I remember. They tend to be transition pathways between areas. These floors are also few and far between. When you get to late game, you're going to see the most of them. To circumvent the wild mouse movement while walking on these floors using this mouse fix, aim your mouse or aim your weapon with your mouse as you walk, and that will keep the mouse movement at controllable levels until you are back on a normal floor surface. I don't have any footage of this to show you in this video. When we get to one of these floors in the gameplay videos, I will show you what I am talking about. Basically though, like when your character gets onto those floors, his just movement and his animation, his walk animation changes, and this mouse fix doesn't really compensate for it. But it's very minor. Excuse me. Part 2. Note, this is considering you are using the mouse fix adjustments from above. So go to the following folder. Your location may vary. Once again, adjust it to accommodate your username. We're going back to the settings file, basically. Open this file in Notepad and change the following line. Control.mouse sensitivity. Start with the value 1.000000. That's 8 zeros. This will give you a value of 1 or 1.0, however you want to look at it. If that value is not giving you enough fluid mouse movement along with the mouse fix, readjust the value to 1.250000. That's 6 zeros. This will give you a value of 1.25. Same thing, if that's not enough, change it to 1.5. 7 zeros. So then you'll be at 1.50. And I went personally with the 1.5 and the 7 zeros. Save your changes and that's it. I'm also using a DPI setting of 800 on my Razer mouse, which is just the default mouse DPI I use for all games, increasing or decreasing from there. If you set the sensitivity higher than the 1.0, or if you have the slider maxed all the way in the game, that will be 1.0. If you put it higher than that, then you will see the slider for the mouse sensitivity in-game extends off the window. This is okay and just a side effect of pushing the setting beyond its limits. Excuse me. If you set the value higher than 1.0 and then you change anything in this window and click accept, this will cause the game to set the mouse sensitivity back to default. You will then need to edit the setting.txt file again to readjust it higher. A long explanation, I know, but it's needed, I think. Very important if you play games like this with a mouse and keyboard, which I do and is why I went into great detail here. I will show you that setting mentioned here. Back in settings file, settings, and oh, it's already open here. And then you want to go to here, this option. Just looking at my other settings here. Yeah, so this is where you will change it to either, if you put it on 1.0 in here, it will just basically maximize the slider in the game. And then 1.25 or 1.5 will extend it further and give you more fluid control. I just find that having this set at 1.5 and using the mouse fix as well as having an 800 DPI setting on my mouse gives me good mouse control movement in the game. Feels fluid and normal to me. So that's what I'm going with, and that's what you can try. You just might have to adjust the numbers, you know, yourself to get the best controls suitable for you. Okay, so that covers all of that. The next section here, next main last section of the Config and Tech video is the in-game options. And the first category you're going to see is the audio category. First setting being the music volume, which I'm setting at 50%. My preference in a good bass level for recording, if you're doing, you know, YouTube recording. The music and sound is great in this game. The music can be a little overpowering in enemy encounters, though, so that's why I've opted to drop it to 50. Some games you can leave everything at 100 and it's fine. It just depends on how the audio's mixed. And then voice volume, sound effects volume, I'm putting all at 100%. Subtitles are going to be on. The game can run at a maximum of 5.1 surround, which I'm going to be using. But in YouTube, when you are hearing it, you're really only going to be hearing it in stereo. I'm just playing it in surround, and it's going to be down mixed or down sampled back to 2.0 stereo. Test speakers listen to how things sound based on settings and verify that you even have working sound in the game. Next category is controls. Whether you want to invert your up and down mouse movements, vibration on if you're using a gamepad, might as well turn it off if you're just using a mouse and keyboard. Mouse sensitivity, use adjustments previously mentioned in this video. This is the setting that you will see where the slider extends way off the screen if you went above 1.0. This is the setting we were manually adjusting. Basic controls, set your keybinds as you see fit. Same for aim mode and rig mode. Set all that the way you want. We'll glance at them when I go into the game at the end of this video and we look at these settings directly and visually. Next category is going to be brightness. Default starts at 50% and increase it as needed based on the reference logo provided. There's 3 logos, the same logo, and I think in game the little tooltip says make the middle logo barely visible. So I'm going to run this game, I guess, at 50. I'm kind of debating on that now. I think I will run it at 50, but I'm definitely going to be brightening it in video editing because this is a dark game for the most part. Next category of not controls but settings is visuals. You have your resolution. I'm using 1920 by 1080, 60 Hertz, 60 FPS. I always play games in full screen. VSync off. Use adjustments previously mentioned in this video. Don't recommend using the version in this game in particular. I don't feel it works as well as it should. Just in testing. So use adjustments mentioned in your NVIDIA or your AMD graphics card to put VSync on. Because as mentioned, this game is designed for 60 frame rate. I think you can probably get 120. Most things may be okay, but they may not be. You're likely to have a lot of animation, a lot of other issues. If you look at the PCGamewiki page for this game, it lists about 8, maybe 10 different things that can possibly go wrong. If you use a higher refresh rate than 60, some NPCs won't even show up and stuff, so you can basically get yourself in a soft lock position in the game where you can't do anything. And I'm recommending the VSync as well so that you can eliminate screen tearing in your visuals. I advise you to look up what screen tearing is on Wikipedia so you understand what that term is referencing, and to understand in the future why VSync is important. VSync is not necessarily important if you have G-Sync monitors. There's something else that I think does it. I can't remember what they're called, but I don't have a G-Sync monitor, so I'm still rocking a 1080p LCD television. Okay, so next setting is graphic quality. Put this on custom, and then you will have an advanced render settings section below that, and then a see below for the individual adjustments. This is what we're going to adjust. It's going to be custom. So the first setting you'll have in advanced render settings is bloom. I recommend leaving that on. It might be a little bit overpowering in this game, depending on how it looks. I'll make adjustments, but bloom overall is pretty cool to use in games, so I advise you to use it. Glow, not exactly sure what that's referencing, but I would still use it. Depth of field I recommend off unless you like blurry backgrounds, because that's what it does. It takes background elements that are not in the focal point of the camera and it blurs them, and I just generally don't like that, so I don't use depth of field in any games. Anti-aliasing off. Use adjustments previously mentioned in this video to force it through your NVIDIA or your AMD card, simply because the anti-aliasing in Dead Space 1 is not good. Blur I recommend off unless you like blurry stuff. I don't know what the blur actually references in the game, but I don't like blur for the same reason I don't like depth of field. Post-processing effects, I would leave those on. Flares on. Motion blur off unless you like blurry movement. When you move your character around and things like that, you'll see a blur, kind of a trail, blur trail from that. So I always turn that off too. Decals, I forget the exact description of decals. I think it references things like if you shoot some enemy in the game and it splatters blood on the wall, or if you shoot and you miss an enemy and cause a bullet hole in the wall, I think those are considered decals, so I would leave those on. And then you got shader quality and shadow quality, and put those on the highest setting, which is high. And then the next category is credits. It's not really a option or a setting, but I mean it's an option, I guess. It's not a setting, but if you want to watch the credits cutscene, we'll watch it when we beat the game, but it's there. So that covers all the settings. In the next video, we'll finish this video by going into the game, and I'll run down the settings we just covered with you in the in-game settings. And then in the next video, we'll cover the modding stuff, which there's only a few brief things to cover, as there's not a lot of mods for Dead Space 1. So I'm going to go and do a quick edit cut here in this video, and then we'll see you in the game for the visual setup. Thank you. Bye. Hello everybody. Welcome to the in-game options part of the config and tech video. So we're just going to go straight into the options here. So here's your audio category. See my 50% adjustment on the music. Maxing out those two. Subtitles on. 5.1 surround. But it's only going to be in stereo when you are watching it on YouTube. Test speakers if you want to. Then got controls. Whether you want to invert controls, I'm going to go ahead and set my vibration to off since I'm using mouse and keyboard. Actually, no, I'm not going to do that, because then that will screw up my mouse sensitivity setting. So you can see here how it's extended off. Like I said, I have it set to 1.50. And then you have basic controls. These are just keybinds I'm using. I'll go over, these things in the game, what they are and what they do. But I'll still run down here and show them to you. Those are what I'm using for the basic controls. And then aim controls. See what I'm using here. I'll go over all of this once we're in the gameplay video, because I like to explain how the game works a little, and the controls at least, at the beginning of the first gameplay video for a game. Okay, you got brightness. It's hard to see probably, but the logo is visible to me. I can see it in the middle. I have it set at 50%. Of course, if you put it all the way up, it's only one logo. I thought there was 3 logos. So you basically just want that logo to barely be visible, and then you'll have it at the right adjustment. And then visuals, your resolution. Oops. Different resolutions you can pick. With 1920 by 1080 being as high as you can go here. Full screen on, VSync off, graphic quality custom, and then advanced render settings. Click continue. Bloom on, glow on, depth of field off, anti-aliasing off, blur off, post-processing on, flares on, motion blur off, decals on, shader and shadow quality both on high. And as explained previously, I'll tell you why I'm using these settings the way I am, but this is what I'm choosing to use in my playthrough. Accept, back out, and then the last option is just the credits if you wanted to see the credits. And that will pretty much cover the options in the game that I wanted to cover. So I thank you for watching this, and we will see you in the modding video that's up next.